I'm honored to be here. Tim and Brandon, this is amazing. I was here last year. I was so fired up to be back here this year. And I'm really honored that you would make time for us to have this panel. Now, before I set the context behind why this is important, we have a rock star panel up here. So I'm going to go ahead and ask my fellow panelists to go ahead and briefly introduce themselves.
Hello, I'm Charlynda Scales. I'm a country girl from the hills of Tennessee. I'm an Air Force veteran, 4th generation. I'm the first officer in my family, proudly. My grandfather was the basis of my first company, Mutt Sauce. We sell across the U.S. online, and we sell in stores in Ohio. My grandfather, his name was Charlie Farrell. His call sign was Mutt. He was an aircraft mechanic, and he was like my father figure. So when I was in active duty, I was at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Dayton, Ohio. I started this company in his honor because he also made a sauce back in 1956 that he used to break bread in a time where there was still segregation. So to honor him, I started out with one small batch of 700 bottles, and we've been in business for 8 years. Today, I also serve as the executive director of the O Taste Foundation, which I started actually just in the last year. I have 2 other co-founders, and it's like night and day. I was a solo entrepreneur with Mutt Sauce. I have 2 co-founders with the O Taste Foundation, focused on building a shared use commercial kitchen in Dayton, Ohio, and also building a financial literacy program specific for food businesses. In the last 9 months, we've raised $4 million and counting. So I know now the impact that you can make when you are focused on helping other people. And I love that. I love being a part of the Bunker family. I sit on the National Board of Bunker Labs, More Perfect Union, Veterans for Political Innovation, and my local Chamber of Commerce. I like to help. I really do. But I love being in a panel with these outstanding veterans to talk about the realness of entrepreneurship and aspects that you may not know that we can bring this perspective for you. So thank you for having this. Thank you for inviting us. It's good to be here.
Hi, everybody. Keenan Beasley here. It's an honor. So, Tim, Mike, thank you guys, obviously, for thinking of me. West Point football player, so I'm going to rep my Army hat today. We're going to keep it competitive. But no, all seriousness, I am a serial entrepreneur. A bunch of failures, a couple of wins, but, in the fight, and I think that's what you guys are going to hear today. I have one clear focus for me and kind of the purpose for what I do, which is to close the quality of life gap in America. I feel that people got us into this problem, and people can get us out. So I believe in the power of entrepreneurship. I believe in the power of diversity. I think the country has underestimated the impact of diversity to get us where we are today. So I think as a conscious capitalist, my goal is to take advantage of that and to create inroads and wins. What I have going on right now is I have a nonprofit called Venture Noir, which, again, feeds that mission. It is based in Bentonville for obvious reasons. We're backed by the Walton family and Kaufman family, Rockefeller family. What we do there is obviously lead a series of accelerators for diverse entrepreneurs. So that's for Ulta as a major retailer. We just took 30 entrepreneurs to South Africa for international business, et cetera. So we've been doing that for 3 years. I have a holding company of CPG brands. Manufacturing, so that's with like celebrity influencers, so everyone from Angela Simmons to Michael Bennett and Brandon Marshall, Cardi B, etc. And then I have a venture-backed company called Sunday to Sunday, which is backed by Johnson & Johnson, Berkshire Hathaway, etc. We've raised about $7.5 million. It's called Sunday to Sunday because we looked at the textured hair solutions, and if anyone knows hair care, we think it's based off of shampoo and conditioner. But any woman with curlier or thicker hair doesn't wash their hair every day. So there's a need for in-between wash care, hence Sunday to Sunday, from wash day to wash day. So we're in retailers nationwide, Ulta, Target, Sephora, et cetera. But yeah, really excited here to just talk about kind of all the realness of what's going on. I think post-George Floyd, we had high expectations, and then we've seen the reports that shit didn't pan out. But again, I think there's an opportunity of diversity, and I think the folks in this room, I'd love to see how they can play a small part in changing the trajectory of kind of where this country's been going.
Ken Sutton, first, thanks to Tim and the group. It's always nice to, when you don't spend a lot of time with veterans, Like, anybody go to the VA hospital and just like going to the VA just because everybody at the VA speaks the same language? So conferences like this really are important, I think, on another levels. Quick background, grew up on the north end of Hartford. If you're from Connecticut, you know what that means. I was fortunate to serve in the Army. I was 75th Ranger Battalion, some of the other Rangers walking around here. Got out of the military, went to University of Connecticut, got my degree at University of Connecticut. Started my business right out of school. I had a marketing firm that we scaled and sold in 2005. So that was my first kind of real entrepreneurial experience. Took my pennies, sat on the beach for a little while, came back in and went towards something that I thought I understood, which was real estate capital markets at a time when you could make money in capital markets. And got involved in it just in time for me to spend 3 years, and then we hit 2009 and things changed again. We're talking about resilience of a military vet, right? So, started doing some consulting work. I knew where all the dead bodies were buried in a capital market standpoint, so we're doing a lot of restructuring and getting people out of bad investments, I guess. And came across some IP that a buddy of mine and I came across in the frequency manipulation space and was able to get a patent and built a company around it. So right now I serve as CEO of Yobe Inc. We're a venture-backed AI software company. We specifically work in extracting biological, linguistic, and acoustic markers of voice in noisy environments. Long story short, we know it's you, we can tell it's you no matter how noisy it is. So, sorry. So, the applications are kind of common sense, right? You can apply it to anything on the commercial side. This is the reason why your Siri doesn't work, because it doesn't have this capability, right? We are creating a lot of verticals where voice to human interface becomes more seamless using, our type of technology. And of course, the government applications, we have partnerships with 3-letter agencies in Washington for obvious reasons. Happy to be on the panel. I asked Mike before this conversation, how real do we want to get? I was concerned, right? And I was given leverage to be as transparent as possible. And I think that my experience in the military was interesting in a battalion where, there was a few people that looked like me, but not a lot. I found that the camaraderie and the cohort that you build over time gave understanding. And so if I can add anything to the panel today, is kind of give you a lens on what the journey looks like for I don't want to say underrepresented, I would say underserved entrepreneurs. And hopefully give you something to think about as you go out into the market, specifically if you're in the cash and check writing business. I have some opinions on that as well that we can talk about in a few.
I told y'all we got a rock star panel. So I'm going to go ahead and rename this panel, too. We're going to call it Each One, Teach One, after an old African proverb. But first, I have to set context behind the why, okay? I spent the last year at Stanford University's Hoover Institution, which shares the same lineage with Admiral James B. Stockdale, who's also a Naval Academy grad. And one of the reasons I bring it up is I'm a big proponent of the Stockdale paradox, which says you have to be willing to accept the brutal facts of your current reality, but have unwavering faith that things will work out in the end. And I know we got a lot of special operators in here, some Navy SEALs. Y'all have a warning order, right? For us as black and brown entrepreneurs, we have a warning order too. And the brutal facts are that Robert F. Smith, the wealthiest African-American in the country, founder of Vista Equity Partners, can't put his own face on his own website out of fear it's going to dissuade investors and other executives from doing business with them. That's a fact. Another fact, over 40% of the military is full of minorities, 30% of which are black and brown. Yet less than 2% of venture capital are going to these entrepreneurs of color. And I'm still questioning about that number because that was before COVID, and that's declined by 45% this year alone. These are facts. CNBC just put out an article around that. And so the reason this is important to have this conversation, whether you're of color or not, is I would like to think everybody here is very passionate about serving all veteran entrepreneurs, and you are sneezers. So the reality is they're facing an uphill battle, and you need to help them navigate it. And we're going to help empower you today through this panel. So the first question I have for the panelists is, On the podcast I host for Bunker Labs of Transition, I ask every guest to take off their armor. And I would love each of you to take off your armor and share a story about your experience of trying to raise capital as a founder of color and how you overcame it.
I mean, it's like which time? I think this last time raising capital was painful. Obviously, last year was interesting. I think the market kind of turned on everybody towards the end of the year. So, I raised the bridge round, and I did 162 investor pitches while running my 4 companies. So, from a time standpoint, obviously brutal, but I think, again, a lot of us face that. I think what's interesting as a diverse entrepreneur is there's a misnomer that if you're a black entrepreneur building a company, you're building it only for black consumers, which is just a ridiculous thing, because once you say that, then the market obviously becomes very small and it's not attractive for venture capital. So I spent a lot of those 160 plus meetings explaining the fucking market to people when they should have just read the deck. But I was trying to get over their bias, and they missed the opportunity. So it's a lot of wasted time because of things like that, because they just don't understand the dynamics of the market, and frankly, they're missing the opportunity. I'm a firm believer when you're raising capital, it's not that you're out begging for help, right? What you're doing is you're presenting an opportunity for people to take advantage of. And I stand on that. So as a diverse entrepreneur, I'm not looking for help. I'm presenting opportunities, and I think part of that is I'm having to coach people on understanding what the actual opportunity is when dealing with an underrepresented founder or someone that doesn't look like them, because usually we're seeing something that they haven't seen. So I would say that's a common challenge that you get as a black founder, right? So I'm building a hair care company, but it's not just for black women, just because I'm black. I'm building a hair care solution for women with textured hair, which is the majority of the market. So anything from hair grades of 2A to 4C, which is the bulk of the industry. So it's actually the biggest market that hasn't been served because you don't see people like me getting funded at the appropriate level. So this is just the reality of what my fundraising process has looked like. A lot of teaching.
I'm a black woman. All I got is armor. I never take it off. It's very rare that I will ever take it off. But the rare moments that I do, it's almost like catastrophic. They're like, what? Who are you? I'm just a regular person. I'm a pandemic mother. I became a new mom in March 2020. So it's been a roller coaster of trying to scale. Well, I will actually say for Mutt Sauce, for me, 2020 was keep it alive. Don't go out of business. And overriding my own feelings of I'm exhausted because I have a newborn and I just checked my phone in the hospital and everything that I had to make money for Mutt Sauce was canceled because I had not embraced e-commerce, because I had not had the mentoring and connections that could tell me before the pandemic the importance of e-commerce. That's when I started muttsauce.com, was March 2020. Who helped me build that? No one. I just did it on the fly. So that, to me, has been a lot of reaction and survival, really. What we've been able to accomplish, I'm very proud that it was very impactful. And the success that I feel with Mutt Sauce was the impact. There was a letter that we got, it was 2 months ago. There was a naval ship out in Florida, and their chef had asked me on a whim, he's like, I know this is a tall ask, but we're about to deploy in a week. Can you get cases of Mutt Sauce to us before we leave? Because this food, dear God, this food, we just want to give the guys a treat before they get back get back on the sea. 48 hours. There you go. Have a good time. Let me know how it was. So to get a letter from the commander of the ship and say the morale skyrocketed during that meal, that's the kind of thing where I was like, I know what we can do with this. It's just my existence with Mutt Sauce has been by myself, no venture capital, bootstrapped all of it, and don't give up because there's a light at the end of the tunnel there. So I love being in the room here to talk about that, because the reality that I had with Mutt Sauce and then the one that I have with the O Taste Foundation, everything is about timing. And I think with entrepreneurs, we get frustrated because we think something should happen at a certain time, but it's going to happen when it's supposed to happen. There are things that you're supposed to experience first, a lot of failure, a lot of rock bottom moments. And I think at year 8, when I started the O Taste Foundation, and I was saying, I'm in survival mode, but I'm still going to try to help, because I know that even with my situation, there are food founders in worse situations, and they don't know how to stay afloat. So I was taking extra time to mentor these food founders and keep them afloat, even as I had my own oxygen vest on. Nobody was holding mine. I'm trying to hold mine and hold theirs too. And that's when the idea started that maybe we should build something, a kitchen, that would help them scale their business, because most of the food founders are in their home kitchen. They need a commercial kitchen in order to scale. Not all of them can co-package their items. So there was a gap there, and as I started learning about it, I learned about food insecurity, food deserts, how food can actually impact the local economy, tourism, all of that. And finding a team that was not like-minded, and you'll hear me say this a lot when I speak to people, I don't look for like-minded people. I look for like-hearted ones. I want you to share the same values as me and be okay with disagreeing all the time. And in that constructive environment is how we were able to raise $4 million. But another thing that was there that was not within me before was a boldness to ask for help and unapologetic about the situation and how people have not helped, and to look them in the eye, and as they're patting themselves on the back, yeah, we gave to this person. No, you have not, but I'm giving you an opportunity to help in a way that will be impactful immediately. And so that is now, that's the new me. I am unapologetic about what needs to be done and what part I can play in doing so. And yes, I am a hot mess because I have a toddler. So there's that.
Mike and I were talking about this earlier around raising money as an entrepreneur of color. You know, there's an assumption when we meet another veteran about this fabric of that person that we just make as soon as we meet them, correct? Right? You can tell me where you served and what you did, and I think I have a pretty good understanding of your level of grit, correct? It's just innate, and it's part of the reason why we love these functions and we have these relationships. This might be confidential, or confidential is me. That word. But I would assume that if you are talking to an entrepreneur of color who has served in the military, that their grit quotient might be a certain basis points higher than the average person that's talking to you. It is just factual. This is not an opinion. This is not a political motivated conversation. It's just the fact that what he or she had gone through. And if you've all served, you realize that even in the military, there's a nuance to managing even that experience for people of color. It's not something that I think that we're oblivious to. If that doesn't play out in spades as an entrepreneur, I don't know what does. And for me, when I was raising my first round of capital, and we raised a few millions, and we just did a bridge as well, just because the market told me I needed to raise a bridge, and so I did. You know, I talked to, I don't know if I did 100, bro, but that's a lot. I don't think I have I'm still a little bit of that kind of grunt guy, so I don't know if I can have the patience, but, you know, I did a lot of pitches, and I talked to a lot of military VCs, as you think I would. I ran the network, I did the conversation, and Mike and I were just talking about, I don't have a single dollar of military VC money in my company at this point. and we made multi-millions and done multiple rounds. But it was a person who my first investor was roughly around just $700,000, an angel investor, who after chasing him for a year and getting into a room with him, literally it was maybe a year and 2 months of actually chasing this guy to get into his office. He did his due diligence and looked at our company, and he read the deck. He actually read it, kicked the tires on the science. You know, we have another hurdle, a barrier of entry is it's this core tech and it's algorithmic science. It's not something that's ever been done, so it's a newness to it. And we sat down and, you know, he threw the deck I had it printed for him because he was old school. So he threw it on the ground and he said, okay, Ken, where are you from? So I told him where I was from. What neighborhood? Told him the neighborhood. Okay, what'd you do in the military? Told him I did in the military. What'd you study in school? Great. What'd you do in capital markets? Great. He said, how much do you want? I said, Frank, well, let's talk about the deal. He says, I looked at the deal. I mean, he was a secondary markets guy, so he knew a little bit about finance. He said, I looked at the deal. I just wanted to look at you. I've known everything I need to know about you just in the way you answered those questions. The deal makes sense. Obviously, I'll do it. It's angel. I'm risking my money. I get it, right? And I'm not saying that every deal that comes through your desk should be looked at that way. And Frank is a prime example of a person who can make decisions and very little data. That's why he's so successful. But you know, if you hear some of the passion in our voices when we talk, right? It's a lived experience. And it's something where there's no favoritism here. We're just looking for, let's have a conversation and let's take off the pattern recognition goggles for 2 seconds and just look at the deal and look at the person offering the deal and do your due diligence. But ask yourself, if this was coming through my network, if it was coming through another vertical, how much more attention would I get? And we have tons of examples of billions of dollars that have been raised through networks and nobody did any due diligence. And they end up being a show on HBO. Right? And so we're just asking for it to be, give it the two places, give it the time and the energy in the room for it to salivate, to mature. And also, to the point that was made around having a network, you know, where I'm from, I didn't have a network of examples of entrepreneurs. I couldn't go to, you know, the 3 Fs. When the first time I heard the 3 Fs, I thought that was so comical. It was comical. Friends, family. Stop. No. I was sending my little tiny E2 check home in basic chaining. There's no 3 Fs for me to raise money for a company. It just didn't exist, right? And so think about that when you're sitting in front of an entrepreneur that doesn't have access, not just to capital, but access to resources and access to the hidden secrets of how it is to raise capital and what you need to have. Even for some of us who've done it for profession prior to that, I was blown away. I did structured finance deals that were multi-million dollars. I just raising $1.5 million. That should have been 3 phone calls. Should have been. And it wasn't 3 phone calls. It was a grind. It was an effort. So let the air kind of come into the room and actually look at the deals and ask yourself, okay, did we give it the right due diligence? Because a lot of those times, those entrepreneurs, and I understand the LP game, and I understand, you know, to the point of, you know, after George Floyd, there was a lot of, we call it diversity theater. There was a lot of that. The market kind of pulled back at the end of the year, right? And I think the numbers that Mike was talking about, 36% pullback, but for black and brown founders, it was like 42% pullback. Just give it some air. Spend some time, and you could do, like for us, spend some time outside the deal with the founder, outside the deal. The pitch environment is not, you know, we didn't get to know anyone that we have a military relationship with in a pitch, right? We ate in the mess hall, and you still got stories of people in college talking about eating in the mess hall with Mike. I mean, that's how you build that fabric. Spend the extra time and energy, and I say it will pay off for you. And not only that, you'll find a pipeline of opportunities that you might not have seen before if you know, just going through the regular way of how you identify what a good deal or a good referral looks like.
So one of the nice things about being a podcast host is I get a chance to interview founders of all shades and color. And I keep my ear to the dirt. And when a black, brown founder that is a veteran raises capital, I do my daggone best to get them on the podcast to share their story. And one of the things that was very sad to me when I was speaking with a lot of these founders, Manuel Godoy, you probably saw him on Shark Tank. His company's Black Sand Entertainment received a $500,000 investment from Kevin Hart and countless others. A.J. Yawn, Division I basketball player out of Florida State. They genuinely seem hurt by the fact that they have this veteran background, but they were not able to raise capital from the veteran community. And so when we talk about like de facto, de jure, I'm curious to learn from you all that have raised capital of what is that real conversation like when you're navigating the veteran space for these founders of color. So at this point, would you recommend them, hey, you need to go to talk to these veteran-friendly venture capital firms, and if not, where are you sending them?
Yeah, I honestly, I haven't pitched any veteran VCs. So I think, again, for me, I'm in CPG, right, especially in beauty care. So it's not a group that I would think to go to for beauty investments, just to be honest. You know, let's be real. It's not like the military is like the coolest place in the world either, right? And so my thesis is predominantly around influence, right, and cultural influence. And I think there's an operational excellence, right, a discipline and a grit that you find obviously in the military, but understanding of influence and how to then model that, it's a little outside of maybe the core competency of us from a military background. So I think there was a fear for me that there wasn't an understanding. So I actually didn't even try, and so shame on me, right? So if part of that 160, I didn't reach out. So I think I actually have to listen to the other two to probably learn so I can actually be better and start to actually pitch, some of the veteran VCs that are in this room and around the country.
Yeah, so I definitely did pitch veteran VCs. So, one of the things that was challenged for us, because it was core tech, is an understanding of the VC to actually get their hands and wrap their hands around the deal. And a lot of the VC funds were either newer in their first fund, they just didn't have the depth or the science experience to kick the tires. Like, I think that at a high level, there was some inertia behind what we were doing, the problem we were solving, the fact that we had NSF money and we had, three-letter agency kind of, purchase orders and those type of things. I just think that the tech was outside of their core competency to a certain degree, right? And there was a kind of a hesitance to kind of dig into it. Hey guys, I get it. You're on your first fund. Yes, your first kid. Right? You're paying attention to the deal slightly differently than after you got a couple underneath your belt. And we don't have any, Andreessen Horowitz-like VC funds yet, right? From a veteran standpoint, they're building up and they're getting inertia to get there. So I think for us, it was really just the market that we were in. Our technology was just hard for them to wrap their hands around when I was raising.
Well, I've had my share of experiences, that's for sure. I don't know if you guys knew this. I was one of the first active duty people to ever go in Shark Tank, and I got epically rejected. So my experience with raising funds and getting funds has not always been positive in the military aspect of it. I did get a grant from Bob Evans. So Bob Evans was one of the first corporations that said, you guys need to look at helping veteran entrepreneurs in a different way. Stop having so many things on the back end of the deal. And don't just dangle the military stuff to get credit for helping military. When we won that first time Bob Evans did it, it was myself and two other companies, and before we could even get home, there was a check in the mail. They said, we're not going to talk to you about taking a percentage. We're not going to talk to you about how we're going to splash your name all over the internet and get credit for helping veterans. We're just going to give you money because that's what you need. And we're also going to give you a mentor to tell you what to do with the money. Because the one thing that they noticed that some of the military funds don't get right is they still don't have the financial literacy that is relevant to their industry. I think that there are organizations, that's why I love Bunker Labs, they're doing it right. They're doing different programs to see what is the most impactful and relevant way to help the veteran entrepreneur. There's still a lot we can do there, though. I notice in CPG, we talk CPG, that's a very, very broad. how you help someone who makes a candle is different from how you're going to help the CPG sauce company. Completely different mentoring. I've been in accelerators where I'm there for 10 weeks. They're like, what'd you learn? It's like, you didn't teach me how to get in Kroger. I know that at all. I know how to do profit loss. So when we're talking about VCs to help military people know that you need to back it up from just giving them the money. You need to give them the relevant mentoring as well to help them scale it. Just handing them $1 million is not always the best way to help. Or if you hand them $1 million with stipulations. That's the one thing that I'm in right now. We have $4 million, and a couple of them said, you can only use this for operations. I'm trying to build a $4 million kitchen. That is construction. I need construction funds. So that's the kind of thing we have to be vocal about, the right way to help.
But please cut the check, though.
I was going to say, I'll take that 1 million.
Yeah,
I'll take it.
It typically goes the other way, where there's a whole lot of mentoring options, and fuck all that. Like,
Cut the check.
cut the check, right? Because diverse entrepreneurs are over-mentored and under-resourced in finance, so I just want to make sure we clearly caveat, cut the check, please. Like, let's just, if you don't remember shit else from this one, like, yeah, cut the check. Cool.
And I do want to make time to open the floor for questions. You know, this is a great platform, and I know Tim's running a tight ship, but I do want to make a couple quick comments first and foremost to help people out there. So I think people mean well when they say they don't see color most of the time, but I can't speak for the rest of the panelists, but when you tell me you don't see color, a lot of times that means you don't see me, because we see it. And I guarantee you, those young men and enlisted men and women that are transitioning out of the military, right, when they're looking on stages and panels, they're looking for people who look like them, because it gives them a sense of agency and it gives them a sense of empowerment. So when we start highlighting entrepreneurs and people don't see themselves represented, they start to wonder why, and they start to ask questions. And we're at the point now to Stephen F. Rogers. He's a professor at Harvard Business School, wrote a book called Successful Black Entrepreneurs, and he basically wrote like a green book of veteran-friendly venture capital firms for black and brown founders, and he listed them down that list, and I have a copy of the book while I'm here. I will love one day where we have veteran venture funds on that list. We have other capital allocation forms on that list. We're not there yet, but one of the things that we have the ability to do as entrepreneurs is create a reimagined future. And the military community has always led American society. We integrated well before states and local governments did. And so just because that's the way things are now doesn't mean that has to be the way they are going to be in the future. But it's a hard decision for us in this room to make and commit to doing it. And when you say, oh, you don't have a good pipeline and stuff, et cetera, then you got to ask yourself, what lens am I looking through this, right? I've got tons. We got black veteran entrepreneurs building rockets that are 3D printed that can take you anywhere in the world in 2 hours or less. And when you start talking about product founder fit, you know, Bill Bruner is the most qualified man in America to pull this off. So these are really high caliber, quality entrepreneurs. If people are having trouble with deal flow and finding them, please access this network of panelists up here, because we're passionate about this. This is what we do. We're going to do it without you, rain, sleet, hell, or snow. But we've got to stop this, oh, we can't find talent. Talent is out there, I promise you. So I want to go ahead and open the floor for questions. So if you have a question for any of the panelists or myself, please. My man right here. Say it with your chest.
I'd love to say it with my chest, but I also want to respect the microphone, talking stick. Hey guys, what's going on? My name is Sal. For the last several years, I've been Army Special Forces Green Beret, and I've worked by, with, and through people who look absolutely nothing like me to solve government, military, and defense problems. And I want to be the most impactful, most unknown name in women's golf. Can you talk a little bit about people that aren't in a diverse community but are passionate about it because it's close to them personally and they want to help, but they want to make sure that the right face is on it? Like, I'll do the grunt work, I don't care. Like, but I'm not the guy, right?
I would answer that, and I do a lot of diversity talking, right? And the rooms often look like this, where there's a couple of black people on stage and it's a super white room to talk about diversity. And it comes down to like how you can help, right? And I would just say, one, I think it's almost slightly ridiculous, right? Because we're actually all super selfish, and that's okay, right? Most people are in this room to make money for themselves, for their family, right? For their community, whatever it is, right? And there's a selfish desire. So one, it's being very upfront about that, right? And it's okay. And I think when you're doing things that are not innate to you, like I used to run Tide. Like Tide was built off of moms. Well, I'm like the furthest thing from a mom, right? But what it was is I cared about mom. So I thought about my mom, right? And I could look at it, and so I could understand the insight from an observation standpoint, and it actually made me more effective because there wasn't a personal connection. And sometimes that personal connection actually I think is harder to then drive impact. So it's great to do it from the outside as long as you recognize the opportunity and you can connect the selfish motivation to that. And so I would just say if you seize an opportunity, go for it, right? And I think that's what I would want to tell this room, right? It's not about how can you help out black people, because then you're not going to do shit, right? Like people haven't been helping black people for a long time. Like, so that's not a motivator. What it is seize the opportunity. If we all had the opportunity to invest in hip hop, we would have done it. Like, it's $1 trillion industry. We missed it. So I think when you're looking at some groups, they're undervalued assets. So realize that, you know, diversity right now is a very undervalued asset. It is cheaper today than it will be tomorrow because people are starting to realize exactly what's going on. Athletes are being paid more and more because they understand their value. This is what's going to happen. So if you're a prudent investor, if you're smart about it and you're looking for ROI, well, look at it now. You should probably strike today because tomorrow it's going to be a different price. And that's the opportunity that I think people are missing. Like,
Yeah, can I jump on that? I think that to the point of doing it because it's the moral thing to do, and it's just the right thing to do, that's nice. But the numbers show that if you take the top quadrant of most diverse companies, they outperform the lowest quadrant profitability-wise by almost 40%. Just do the numbers. Forget, we're all business people, right? Understand what the numbers look like when you do these things. And that kind of makes the thesis work. Yeah, it's a benefit that we feel good and we're doing something that we feel is a moral obligation. I get that. But just do the run the math. It's more profitable to look at these things through that lens. You just make more money and you insulate your business from making some horrible mistakes culturally by being tone deaf by having. I mean, it's just, there's so many bullet points. I mean, it's almost like we say this like ad nauseum. So many bullet points for this thesis. The fact that we're continually having to talk about them is almost frustrating, right? Just run the numbers, do the analysis, and ask yourself, okay, is our fund, is our position, is our company better for taking this initiative? And if that's your only motivation, fine, do that.
it's not philanthropy. Like,
It's not.
That's the big thing. We have there's so much money that is gone towards philanthropy. There's 600 ESOs helping out black people, and yet you still got a horrible rate of successful black companies from a funding standpoint. So it's not philanthropy. So I want us to not have the conversation on how can I help. Yeah. Have that in a room full of nonprofits. This is about how we make more money.
I do want to say, I want to make a comment about that. It's also not impact investing, right? It's smart is what you're talking about. And I want to emphasize this around veterans, right? And everything we're talking about here, this stuff is peer reviewed too. Syracuse University, Institute of Veteran Military Families, they put out a study on black entrepreneurs, okay? While 40% of black businesses in America ceased generating revenue during the pandemic altogether, black veteran entrepreneurs off to the races, right? Still in the fight. So really high caliber entrepreneurs that are just an untapped like economic resource throughout. And so again, man, the opportunity is there, but you just like you said, it's not philanthropy, it's not impact investing, it's just smart. Are there any other questions?
I actually had a question for Ken. There's a lot of people here that are, interested in the TLAs out there. I wondered if you've done a lot of sipper-sitter and like how you would maybe help other veterans or other people of color here.
Oh, I didn't hear.
Sipper-sitter process?
SBIR. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, for us, you know, I kind of did my due diligence ahead of time. And, you know, I didn't want to be a government contract company. That's kind of where people, you know, you get my background and kind of want to throw you down that lane. I really wanted to use the money to basically for R&D and make sure that my IP stayed my IP, but I had some kind of record of quantifying some type of results on my software and what we were doing and how, you know, demonstrative it was for the marketplace. So I would encourage anyone to do a you know, a phase 1 SIBR. Like that's the secret. If you're going, my first phase 1 that I did, I was surprised how many large corporations were in the class. And that's really the hook. The hook is to do as many phase 1s as possible. You can do a phase 2, but I mean, my company was nowhere near going to be the same company 24 months after I did a phase 2. There's absolutely no way it could be done. And so I would say, you know, do as many phase 1s as you can. Be very clear if you have any type of technology or IP that you box it off, that the IP is already, you know, kind of baked into a bucket, and run it through your military relationship in your channels. Like I talk to the Afro guys all the time, right? You know, the DARPA guys are in my back pocket right now. There's boxes that they need to check off, that we as veterans help them check off those boxes, right? And so I would encourage everyone, if you're thinking about SIBR, we can talk after this. You know, we don't do as much now just because we're going down a different path. But in those early years, guys, I tell you, that was kind of, it gave us, you know, validation, it gave us capital, and it gave us a lot of leverage to go out there and continually have conversations about the efficacy of our technology. So I would encourage anyone to do it. Plus some of the mentorship you get, not the mentorship, but some of the background support you get, like they can get analysis on your company and kind of write your white paper if you don't have those things. All those things are worth the time and energy it takes to actually write the SIBR.
There's also a lot of support at local state universities around that. Rutgers, Newark, NJIT, they're always doing stuff around those SBRs or SBR grants. So wherever you are, take advantage of your local state universities around that stuff because they're hunting for it. Go ahead.
I got to take this one. So I'm a product of, so I grew up in Hartford, Connecticut on the north end. Right across from where the housing project I grew up in, there was a train track. And the other side of that train track was the University of Hartford, right? And if anyone knows Connecticut, well, you do. Long story short, across the train tracks, socioeconomics are different than on my side of the train tracks, right? So we used to get a lot of the education students that wanted to come over to the Boys and Girls Club in my neighborhood and get their hours. And they're gonna do good, right? Which is fantastic, I award that. We could smell your transitional experience with us as soon as you walked in the front door. Like, yeah, you won't make it to the end of the semester. Just, you're not, right? And so there's no buy-in. We can't give you any credibility, right? What I would say, and we're all military people, there's no extra stuff you got to do. Just be authentically you. Make the mistake. You know, I told the story. Maybe I didn't tell the story, but so my Ranger buddy was a Marine, and you know his ASVEST scores were low, so he had to be a Marine. So, so sorry about that, guys. I couldn't resist. So. Just the cultural stuff we had to go through was fantastic because we didn't have any barriers of conversation. So I would just say, just my opinion is just be authentic, right? And just be straightforward and tell them what you know, tell them what you don't know, and be mentored. I don't understand that. Break it down for me so I can understand it. I award the fact that you asked the question and the passion is there. Don't let the noise and the bravado stop you from that passion because it's going to challenge it. Trust me, we're going to push back a little bit, right? Just keep going through it, and when you come out of it, the impact that you can have will be exponential, I promise you.
I have another comment on that, too.
Oh, yeah.
You know, I'm a Naval Academy grad. I'm from Texas, and I opened a boxing gym in Newark, New Jersey. And I thought I was coming in there, Captain Save 'em, right? And they knocked me down real quick, all right? So what I learned over the years, though, was, you know, part of it is, and it was a completely different graphic. Like, I didn't grow up in the inner city. People know me from Newark now, but, like, that wasn't my background growing up. But just being seen, and like he said, being present. You know, people would come in and they try to, you know, save a group of kids on a weekend. It's not going to happen. But guess what? Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, you know, you're there 7 days a week. They keep seeing you, that consistency. And then the thing that's universal to everyone, which is, again, why I'm so bullish on audio, is the power of storytelling and resonance, right? I host a podcast, Confessions of a Native Son, and I get super personal on there. And so many people reach out to me and say, hey, you know what? Your story really resonated with me. Then I might have had a different background, but that's what you're really going for. So where is the common denominator? What are those universal truths? Everyone wants to be loved. Everyone wants to be felt appreciated. Everyone has hardships, right? Those are the common denominators that are going to allow you to connect with the demographic that you're trying to, regardless of the color of your skin.
Yeah, and I would just build on it, man. Just be authentic, right? I mean, it's don't overthink it, because I can tell you what it looks like on the other side, right? So I sit on the board for I Am Athlete, right? So a fantastic podcast led by, you know, Brandon Marshall, one of the greatest wide receivers out there, right? Just rock star group, right? We had a group with Swaggy P, right, from the Lakers, and just all these guys, right? Just crazy personalities and real athletes. There was a producer that we first had on the show, for the show, white guy, Jewish guy from California, and he really just wanted to connect and kind of probably had great intentions. But what he did is he started to change who he was, right? He was acting. So now he started to have a little slang, right? He started to dress a little different, right? He was just trying to, I mean, people were reading through that. We're looking at, like, who the fuck is this clown? Like, what are you doing? Like, it's okay to just be yourself, and it's okay to want whatever the transaction is. Just be straight up. People can handle that and deal with it. So you don't want to try to be something you're not. And so that's the best advice that I could give is, like, just be authentically you, right? We probably all have friends that are very diverse, right? I have some friends that are crazy, you know, out there, extroverted, you know, creatives. I have some really introverted, nerdy folks. I have black friends. I have white friends. I have Asian friends, right? And they're just them, though, right? It's the consistency and the authenticity that builds the connection. So if you're trying, you're going to then act. And if you act, people are going to call you out as a fraud, and it won't work.
Any more questions? Man, looking sharp.
How's it going, everybody? I appreciate you guys, being so honest with the panel and everybody. Charles Masters, CEO at MK3 Industries. I'm actually originally from San Juan, Puerto Rico. My first time out was going to West Point. So whenever I come back, I love, like, seeing the hometown. But I always see that Hispanics and communities of color, brown, black, there's always, like, asymmetry of information in terms of they just don't know, or there's, like, they just don't believe that they're going to have the same opportunity as everybody else, basically. How do we basically, like, close that gap and empower those communities that are underserviced, basically?
First of all, mucho gusto. Part of my family is Mexican, so I definitely have had several conversations about, like, how do we show the complexity and impact of the community, not just black and brown. Like, how do we tell them history as well as telling them, like, we need to have the same opportunities? I think that part of it is just being in the room. There's power in being in the room. Your presence changes the whole atmosphere, the conversation. Being open, to be transparent, let the armor off so people know exactly what reality they're living in. All of these things are what we need to do personally as black and brown the community. I think that some of the most impactful moments in my career as an entrepreneur were when I kind of told them, like, I'm just grateful to be here. I'm going to fly to San Francisco where, my brothers and sisters are. I'm going to be in a room with probably some really wealthy people, and we're going to have a very frank conversation. Because if I'm not up here, there's no other black woman up here. So the black women and the white women in the room need to see another woman on this panel. Be the person. Be okay with being the only one. Whether you're black, whether you're brown, whether you're white, you gotta be okay with being the only person in the room that's different.
I got a comment on that too. So even, I'm gonna use the military for example, right? So I'm a lieutenant down in Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, infantry. I'm thinking I'm hot stuff. But there was a thing that a lot of the lieutenants would live like at the beach, which was like 45 minutes away. All the enlisted, called them E-Dogs. They live local in Jacksonville. And so we want to have that like separation, right? And when I went on deployment to Okinawa, right, I got moved up to weapons company, and so that's why I got big. I put on like 20 pounds, working out and lifting, never got it off. But the thing was, when I was in Okinawa, right, I'm talking to the Marines, I'm telling them, hey guys, you got to work out, you got to do this, you got to do that, and guess what? They saw me in the gym with them, 7 days a week. And so if I didn't show up to the gym, what they say? They say, hey, sir, we didn't see you in the gym today. So that was really enlightening to me from a leadership perspective of when your Marines get to see you. It's one thing to talk about it, but it's another thing to be there leading it. And so when I got back to Camp Lejeune from that deployment, I didn't live in Topsail at the beach. I lived in town. And so the Marines got to see how I actually lived. You know what I mean? They see you in the grocery store with their kids. Hey, sir, they see you at the gym working out. Hey, sir. Too often what's up happening is we get really successful, and then we move out of these communities, and we come in like once every 6 months, and it's like, you need to get your life together. It doesn't work like that, right? They've got to see you. They've got to interact with you. It's a very subtle thing, right? And all of a sudden, they're going to start trying to talk to you. Like I was telling them before we came here, they was like, yo, Mike moves different. Like, I didn't even know what move different was, but it's just they had not seen someone write a book, do podcasts, be on national television, and yet he's in there in the gym with them holding mitts. So think about just consistency, right, and being seen, right? If a tree falls in the woods and nobody sees it, does it make a sound? And that's why you see so many of us out here, as civilians up on stage talking because, as a black Marine infantry officer, I felt like that tree in the woods, if I'm being completely honest. And so being in the community that I'm talking about impacting, that's how I'm able to make a lot of that impact. So you've got to find that balance, and I know people are at different phases in their lives, but try to be seen, try to build some consistency. That's where you're going to make the real impact. It's not like one program or anything like that. It's being in the trenches each and every day, doing the best you can with what you have.
And I'll build on that. I believe in just ethno-aggregation, right, or the idea even that density breeds success. So sometimes it's just around, getting closer to some of the other people. The diverse entrepreneurial network is very fragmented, right? There's no Silicon Valley of, like, diverse entrepreneurs. I guess maybe Atlanta, like, a little bit. but outside of that, it's pretty fragmented, so I think it's being intentional about kind of building those connections and making sure, because there are a lot of very successful, diverse entrepreneurs, right, and companies that are out there that have a lot of that information that have gone through the deal flow. It's just sometimes because we think that there's only a few dollars reserved for us that we shouldn't share with one another. So I think as long as we're intentional about trying to come together, like I host a dinner series at my house every week, literally every week with entrepreneurs, just to talk about these things, right? Like, who's got a ROFR? Like, what are some of the terms looking like through the, as the market has changed? Like, who are some good funds that we should talk to? Who's an asshole? Like, who shouldn't? So I think that it exists. You just have to be intentional, and we have to do it outside of the known, social media circles, right, at times. I think everyone wants to post everything, and I'm guilty. I post a lot of shit, too. But, some of these, conversations, they are closed-door things, right? And we just have to be intentional about it.
We've got time for a few more questions. Go ahead in the back right here.
Jalom. So this question is mostly for Charlynda because, again, you made the point that there aren't a lot of you up on stage all day today. I've kind of noticed. And granted, I understand that we're all veterans, so there are very few female veterans here, even fewer women of color. And I'd just like you to, one, I'd like to applaud you for taking off some of your armor and sharing some of your stories with us. Two, just out of curiosity, when you first started talking, all four of you, this room was half empty. and then it continued to empty as you continued to talk. All of the VCs that you were potentially trying to talk to were not in the room from what I could see. Charlynda, just out of curiosity, how much harder was it for you to raise any kind of capital because of your gender rather than your color? Because, again, US population, 51% women. Every single person I've heard up there talk about the markets that they're going after, mostly women, whether they be moms, shopping for their families, etc. Just curious.
Yeah, it was not easy. There's a lot of barriers that we have to get through. One is getting through the barrier of, can she be taken seriously? Can I have a serious financial discussion with her? If she's in food, okay, she just likes having a good time, dinner and stuff like that. But when I start talking about food deserts and food insecurity and the data behind that, they're like, oh crap, who is she? And then you have to have the conversation, oh, you look really young. What does she know? Like, I'm over 40. I've served in the military over 15 years. I've been a government civilian. I've been a contractor and active duty military, and I'm still a reservist. And I own 3 companies. Can we please have this conversation? Can we start talking now? So, and you have to try to have the conversation and not let your passion seem aggressive and that I have an attitude problem. I do, but still. I mean, but you have to get through all that to finally talk about a serious subject. And I do wish in a perfect world that we could just get to the facts and make an impact. And when I tell you the number on the screen, that we're not haggling the number down to the bare minimum that you want to give and still get credit for helping.
I kind of wanted to piggyback off that question because Charlynda, as you know, before you got up on stage, hey Remy, I had brought up the point. And I was like, I found this panel interesting. One, I showed up because I love you, so I had to come and support you. But 2, we were talking about how you all could have been on different panels and brought this issue into those conversations versus having to have a completely separate conversation. So then that way, the venture capital funds who aren't in the room could have potentially been in the room because it had been a topic that they were willing to listen to, which could have given you an opportunity to get funding, which now it's kind of almost a lost opportunity because some of them aren't in the room. And I work at an investment bank, and I go to financial conferences all the time, and it's always like having these DEI conversations with people who aren't even DEI experts. And so then there's so much that gets lost in those conversations because it's almost like, oh, you're black, so you got to be well, like able to have DEI conversations. But there are people who legit get training to do that for specific reasons because there's things that get lost. And just from like. With all that back information, I just wanted to add to bring that in there. How does that make y'all feel when it comes to like coming to these kind of conferences to sit on panels and to lose those opportunities? Because like, I feel like you guys could begin asking different questions instead of like telling people, oh, well, you don't have to feel odd because you're white. Like, you could be actually answering questions about, like, what does it mean to have to try to get to your consumer base? Like, what kind of market analysis are you doing to figure out, like, how your product is going to do in the market? Where you could be actually answering questions that you're actually an expert in versus having to answer questions that they can go to a DEI conference about.
I think that's a great
First off,
question.
thank you. You need
thank
a round
you.
of applause. Like, I mean, we need to take a moment.
I gotta jump
for that.
Keenan, I got to jump on this real quick because there is a nuance when you're putting events like this together, right? And there's a lot of landmines out there. And to be fair, you know, the team at Context Ventures did ask me. They said, hey, what are your thoughts? Do we spread people out or do we put them on a panel all together? And I made the decision that I think we should have this panel, mainly being because I wanted people to see. No different than writing the book Black Veteran Entrepreneur, right? People say you should just write a book about general entrepreneurship. But it's one of those things of when you have a group that hasn't been seen, I want them to feel agency and I want them to be seen. And there are people in this room that are navigating a lot of those landmines we talked about before. So it's not every day, like you said, we get all of us at the same time. You know, we are kind of scattered. So with regards to this panel, that was the reason. But I appreciate you bringing that up.
And the real thought is I wasn't going to do it. I'll be completely honest with you. I actually didn't want to do this panel. for that exact reason. I was very uncomfortable. I asked a lot of questions before I did, because I don't like the forced diversity conversation. Again, because it looks like it's a conversation about impact instead of what this room really cares about, which is making more money, right? And so that's why I try to divert my answers to that. And I think oftentimes black entrepreneurs are put in this position, and we have to have these conversations, right? We raise $1 million, and it's like we're celebrities, right? When we go home, when it's really, you didn't raise shit, right? It's a drop in the bucket, right? We don't receive large checks, right? We receive the philanthropic type of investments. So it's really around the idea that we are on the outside of what is core to this industry of venture capital and entrepreneurship and business. So I think you asked I think you made brilliant comments, as well as the question, how it makes me feel personally. I actually hate this discussion. I hate being on this stage. I love everyone on this stage, right? And I love this room, but I actually hate being in this position because I don't get to talk about what is great about my business. Instead, I'm talking about the experience of being black, which no one in here, for the most part, is going to relate to, and frankly doesn't really care, right? And it'll get lost as soon as we leave this room. So it's tough. I understand both sides, so I don't fault anyone for it, right? And I think we need to keep having this, but I loved your question and your comment so that I could actually have this answer on, I actually hate being up here having a diversity conversation in a room full of predominantly white men.
And I have to echo that. I'm sorry, I have to echo that with so much passion, because it diverts from the point, right? We are all successful entrepreneurs in our own right, to a certain degree. That's the conversation. The fact that we have to have this conversation, I don't know how effective it is in this venue. It's really effective when my VCs make money on the exits. Nobody's questioning that, right? It's more effective when you're having a conversation behind closed doors with your investors and with your stakeholders, and you're giving them some sensitivity tips around, this is what just happened in that conversation that you did not hear. This was the language, this was the layering, this was said, this is how our value is being eroded by this one little tiny statement here. And women are shaking their head because they know exactly what I'm talking about, right? This is not the bane of our existence. We love to come here and talk about diversity. You guys don't want to hear about diversity all the time. You guys have been hearing about it nonstop for almost 3 years now, right? We are highly sensitive to that. The other part of it is we still have a problem, right? And we have a responsibility to shine a light on it to a certain degree. And I know somebody reached out the other day, told me, how much money I raised, and like, dude, you're like, in this little percentile. I'm like, no, it can't be true. Can't be true. Cannot be true. Send me the numbers. I'm like, wow. And so it makes it easier for me to have conversation. I'll come out and I'll talk about diversity, because that number just cannot be true. And so, yeah, we don't enjoy it. We have an opinion. We have a point of view. But if I think back to my military career, the impact I was able to have as an African-American troop was one-on-one with a guy in a foxhole in the middle of some place we're doing some kind of op, and having an actual conversation that years later changed his lens, and sometimes it's one by one. If we could do it with a group like this, that's fantastic. We're just trying to say, basically, consider the topic when you go about your navigating your just throw it, is that true? Am I not giving this opportunity? Am I not giving this opportunity credit? And we're saying, bank on the fact that for this particular group, we have instant credibility if you're talking to a veteran. We're not talking about this in a vacuum. This is a veteran conference, right? So we're actually talking to family. That's why we can be kind of transparent with you guys. We have some credibility. We have some skin in the game, so that we might have a legitimate point of view that might be warrant just a couple of seconds of thought.
Thank you again for everyone for this panel.
I had. Oh yeah. Okay. So, because it is Black History Month, I just want you guys to learn some Black history today. The 6888 was the 88th Central Postal Battalion. The reason why our kitchen is called 6888 Kitchen is because in World War II, they sent 855 black women to Europe to fix the backlog of mail. So if you have a grandfather or somebody who was in World War II, They got their care packages because of 855 black women. Okay?
To all my panelists, thank you so much, and we appreciate you all for sitting here and listening to us talk, and really hope you walk away with this as sneezers. So we talked about a lot of stuff up here, but at the end of the day, you're not going to have all four of us at the same time. You're going to be the ones that are going to speak to the existence that we talked about up here today. So thank you.